About my age and if I was married. They're wearing slippers. So office slippers is something that I've only ever seen in Korea. Yeah, and the other thing too is after lunch or maybe after. 안녕하세요. 미국에서 온 조나단입니다. About 4 years ago, I graduated from MIT with an MBA, and I got an offer at a 대기업 in Korea. And so I moved to Korea about 4 years ago and have been working and living here ever since. So I work for a large technology company planning next generation products. It's, you can say, like technical marketing. Okay, so in this next segment, I'm going to talk about my job and what it's like to work in Korea as a foreigner. So I decided to come to Korea because I've always had an interest in working in Asia, and I've been to China, Singapore, and a number of other Asian countries, but I hadn't been to Korea. And with the big boom with K-pop, and I feel like Korea is very much an up-and-coming place, and it's still a place in Korea that I feel like has been unexplored by a lot of people and had a lot of mystery and attraction to me. So I wanted to come and work and live here. Yeah, I definitely applied to other technology companies and had offers at some of them. So I could have lived in the Bay Area or maybe Seattle, but to me, I felt like this was much more of an adventure, and I could still be, in a country that has great technology companies and still be working in the field that I loved. So the image of Korean corporations, if you can imagine the typical Bay Area company where it's almost like people come into the office very casual, they have very casual meetings, they have snack bars and little lounge areas, and people are very kind of free, and it seems like not as much stress. In Korean companies, it's much more rigid and has more hierarchy, and so that's maybe one thing that's different, but also Korean companies are very much admired for the new technology and the innovation that they have, and really how quickly they are able to make new great products. So I don't think that most Koreans really know. Sometimes I think even many people think Samsung is maybe not even a Korean company, or maybe they don't really even know where LG is. I think they might know some of the car companies, but I still think that when many Americans think of Asian companies, they usually just think of China or Japan, and maybe Korea gets left out a little bit. So my family had a mixed reaction. They had known that I had wanted to work in Asia, and I had already been abroad. So they have been a bit used to me not being in the US all the time. But I think they were really hoping that I would just find a job in the US. But of course, they were very happy that I got the job that I really wanted. So they were very happy for me, but they were maybe a little bit feeling a little sad because they knew that they'd only be able to see me maybe once a year. Yeah, so I'm really lucky. My family has been very accepting of my decision, and they're very happy that I'm living the life that I want to live. So I'm lucky that I haven't had anybody upset or kind of regret that I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah, there's a big difference. However, there might be some companies that are more competitive than other companies in order to attract people from overseas to come and work and live in Korea. But overall, the salaries in the US are a bit higher, except for maybe a few companies and a few positions in Korea. I feel like money isn't everything about life. So money that maybe I could have had in the US, it can't buy me the experiences that I have had in Korea. For instance, I found my wife here. I've had really interesting experiences working in a different culture. I've met a lot of great colleagues. I've had a lot of interesting personal experiences outside of work that you can't really put a price tag on. I'm still early in my career, so I feel like these are the kinds of things that I can still try to experience before I get older and have kids and maybe a bit more life responsibilities. Yeah, this is kind of a small thing, but it's shocking. It's when I first started working in this company, I saw people in very nice business clothes, but then I looked down at their feet and they're wearing slippers. So office slippers is something that I've only ever seen in Korea. Yeah, and the other thing too is after lunch or maybe after breakfast or almost any time, if you go into the 화장실, there's people in there brushing their teeth all the time. And so in the US, I never saw people with slippers, and I rarely saw people in the bathroom brushing their teeth, but I see that all the time. Yeah, maybe Americans need better dental hygiene, but I haven't really seen too many people in the U.S. brushing their teeth after lunch. Yeah, so many Koreans work lots of hours. Like of any country, I think Korea is up near the top of hours worked. So that can be a little bit difficult. The other thing that's different also than from the U.S. is I don't think that in Korea colleagues like to be the first ones to leave the office. So even maybe if their work is completely done, they may hang around longer just because no other colleagues have left. So people feel more of a sense of commitment to the group and they don't want to be the first ones to leave. So then I also feel like, oh, I'm done, but nobody else has left, and should I go or should I stay? So that's another kind of interesting thing. Yeah, yeah. It can be, it's been a little bit difficult, and also maybe in the US the hours are a bit more flexible, whereas in Korea there's usually a set time and then an end time, and you have to be in the office at those times. But I've been here for a number of years now, and I'm used to it. So what I think in my mind is someday, whenever maybe I'm back in the US, I'll feel like there's just such freedom, right? Because I've had to get used to working kind of how a Korean company works. When I go back to the US, it'll feel like, oh, this is so easy now. Yeah, so one of the questions that I had during my interview, they were asking about my age and if I was married. So the reason why I thought that was funny is because I think there's a law in the US where you can't ask these kind of questions in an interview, but from the Korean perspective, these are very important things to know. So I didn't know that at the time, so I was like, oh, I didn't expect that question, but now I can understand why it's asked. So I think that recently, within the past maybe 3-4 years, something like that, Korean companies have really been on the rise in terms of recognition around the globe. And in fact, the world looks to Korea and Korea's exports as an indicator for the general economic health and well-being of global trade. So I think not only is Korea an important exporting country, but the company's brand names are also becoming better. And it's all, I think, a part of the rise in recognition of Korean culture. It has a lot to offer, and I think it's beginning to get recognized more and more. Yeah, I can recommend certain Korean companies to my friends, and also if they want a really interesting life experience too, I would definitely recommend it. Even just outside of the work too, you get to be part of a really interesting culture. The hardest thing about a Korean company is it's difficult to explain a different opinion that you might have than what your boss has. People typically don't contradict their bosses too much, and so I think that can sometimes be a little bit like maybe frustrating. So that's one difficult thing. But the really positive thing is that the team atmosphere can be really good, and companies can even sometimes provide budgets for teams to go out and have dinners, or they have like coffee together. So I feel that there's a much stronger sense of team camaraderie than sometimes in other companies outside of Korea. So I've been talking a little bit about my experience of working in a Korean company and some of the interesting perspectives that I've learned while I've been here. And if you've liked this segment, give it a thumbs up and subscribe below. 안녕!